I'm so overwhelmed by emotions, and I will allow myself to be emotional because today is one of the rare days where you're going to find gatherings of gender that are celebratory. So allow me to be emotional. Can somebody get me a tissue? I would really like to get to my contribution. Thank you. I was so nervous because I'd organized transport for people at the back. And they are to blame for the delay of the session because I wouldn't have had the strength to stand up here representing students without the students that contributed to the formation of today. So I'm so glad that I had to speak this late because at least it gave them a chance to get here in time. Ladies and gentlemen, ndiyanibulisa nonke ngegama leCenter for Women and Gender Studies. My name is Unomthamenye. I am a student at this university. I am also the co-founder of Activist Connection, which is represented at the back. My input today is titled Isiqalo Senhlambuluko, which could loosely be translated as the start of healing.
This is by far the most progressive change the university has done. This is the dawn of hope we have been longing for. This is the hope that we have been crying for. The building of gender study for women and gender studies is the hope that will heal and not kill. Hope that will strengthen and heal, and hope that will educate. This is by far the most progressive change for the university. Finally, our university will be having a safe space for women. It will be having a healing space for women, a space where the political, social, and economic gender injustices will be dealt with without fear and without failure. A space that will deal with the patterns of systematic interactions in the social aspects that relate to power and authority that has a strong patriarchal system. A center that will deal with the worldwide cultural and religious factors that are favorable to modernization and have a deep-rooted relationship with the pompous democracy of the bourgeoisies.
Today is about the launch of the Center for Women and Gender Studies, a first of its kind in the Eastern Cape province. A space conceived by the students and staff in Mandela before I even arrived here in 2016. It's been a pleasure to work with different students, colleagues, to conceptualize and operationalize the objectives of the center. It is understood that the academic project of this center will be linked directly to the bigger transformational project of the university by mainstreaming gender agenda within the curriculum, teaching and learning, and the ethos of the university. The academic project of the center is central in defining the dynamic African university that produces cutting-edge knowledge for a sustainable future. I believe that through a deep historicization of the gender agenda, we can begin to do what Nomta and quoting Tisani termed as intellectual cleansing. ukuhlambulula, of her story, which can heal us from the systematic and intellectual trauma that defines our society today. We hope that this center will be a space where intergenerational conversations can take place based on our own collective agenda in healing our societies by moving away from the growing, celebrated, individualizing, and neoliberal feminism that seems to isolate middle-class women and their individualized sense of achievement away from the mass of Black and mostly poor women.
It is a very proud day for us at Mandela this evening, as we wake up daily to what Professor Qola has called a South African nightmare. The Center for Women and Gender Studies is launched within a national climate, fired, and in my view, even marred, might be the right term for me, by violence, urban brutality, unsurfaced sexual violations in rural homes, because I'm a rural girl, as well as widening socioeconomic inequalities, gangsterism in our city, tensions and fear in our society, not least in our university. The launch of this center is a contribution of the efforts by our university to work with our students and communities in fighting the structural violence that defines our movement, opportunities, and life chances. I want to single out our students because they did not get angry and threw stones. They got angry at a lack of this work and worked hard to make sure that this work happens. So I want to thank our students for that.
Wow. Molweni Betuna. My name is Asipem Khalisa, and I am a research assistant at the Center for Women and Gender Studies. Today, I will be facilitating this session. The videos you just saw depicted the beginning of revisiting the gender agenda and what was a year ago when we launched the Center for Women and Gender Studies in October 2019. As Mama Winnie Madikizela Mandela once said, and I quote, "Together, hand in hand, with our marches and our necklaces, we shall liberate this country." Indeed, within a year of existence, together, hand in hand, with our programming, partnerships, and contributions to the gender agenda, we have moved to a greater direction as the Center for Women and Gender Studies. Thank you all for joining us today as we celebrate the one-year anniversary of the center. And of course, we are joined by the one and only King Ta, Thandiswa Mazwai. Please note that this session is recorded for report purposes. Also, kindly tell your friends, colleagues, and family members that the session is also live streamed on YouTube under the Nelson Mandela YouTube page. All what the center has achieved wouldn't have been possible without Dr. Babaloma Goqwana, who is the interim director of the center. Dr. Babaloma Goqwana will do the opening and welcoming for us today. Over to you, Doc.
Thank you so much, Asipe. Thank you so much to everyone who has attended this webinar, and thanks to the organizing team from the Center for Women and Gender Studies. I would like to welcome all who are watching via different media platforms across the country. And firstly, let me acknowledge the presence of the DVC Transformation and Engagement, Professor Kiet. He has been the engine behind the establishment of this center, along with the retired Professor Andrew Leach. I would like also to acknowledge Professor Phumla Qola, who is a professor at the Center for Women and Gender Studies, our ICT team, Ponzo Mabena, and Dr. Thomas Hilmer, the organizing team at the Center for Women and Gender Studies, our partners at Rhodes University via Dr. Magadla, University of Pretoria via Dr. Masola, our broader Nelson Mandela Bay community members, and everyone who is watching from different corners of South Africa. I would like to welcome you today, and thanks for joining us. I'd like to welcome especially our favorite guest tonight, Ms. Thandiswa Mazwai, an intellectual, the lover of an Azania, a feminist, and a Pan-Africanist. Thank you, Thandiswa, for agreeing to come and celebrate with us tonight as we are reaching our 1-year anniversary as the Center for Women and Gender Studies. Before I go on, colleagues, I would like to quote Bongo Muffin in 1984 when she said, and I quote, "It is one of the ironies of history that the most pervasive and total oppression, the oppression of women, has been to a large extent neglected by scholars within the ranks of the liberation movement. This can be explained in part by the male chauvinism, which has been the bane of colonial liberation movements, and also the imprecise terms in which we discuss the future socio-economic order we envisage for a free South Africa. And yet, the success or otherwise of our struggle may depend on the extent to which we're able to involve as wide as possible a front of liberation forces against the oppressor regime, women, especially the Black women. Black women will and must form a central pillar of such a front. We submit Black women have no cause to commit themselves to the liberation struggle unless the freedom to be achieved will in turn grant them equality and human dignity." This quote from Mama Phyllis Ntantala from 1984 is one of the quotes that were used in the formulation document of the Center for Women and Gender Studies after 2016. It was intended to awaken us into establishing a center that was very intentional on its mandate in dignifying women generally, especially Black women in particular, and the broader minorities, including youth, queer, and Black communities broadly. The launch and running of the center has been a collective effort. Colleagues, we have managed to reach this 1 year with so much pride because of many people who have contributed to where we are right now. The Center for Women and Gender Studies was designed to contribute to artisanal and social transformation through the promotion of women empowerment and gender equality and equity by way of rigorous critical analysis of role of economic, religious, and political institutions in legitimizing and institutionalizing gender, sex, and sexual disparities. We owe our existence to a team of people and activists that have sacrificed their time and sometimes their research time to prioritize the Center for Women and Gender Studies work. Thanks to the consistent support of the Vice Chancellor of Nelson Mandela University, Prof. Sibongile Mutwa, the DVCs, Mr. Lebohang Hashatse, Professor Foxcroft, Dr. Mkwebi, and our very own DVC of Transformation and Engagement, Professor Andre Kiet, who has been a visionary, hardworking, and very supportive towards the establishment and running of the center. We are really grateful to the Dean of Students, Lutando Jack, Dr. Laura Best, Sisbaba Alwashushu in the VC's office, the Director of CANRAD, Mr. Alan Zinn, Director of Transformation Office, Dr. Ruby N. Lavendal, Deputy Director of ICT, Dr. Thomas Hilmer, our videographer, Potoma Bena, the Communication and Marketing team under Chantel Yaneka, Vio Bongela, Zandile Mbabela, Michelle Bothma, Tembi Buthelezi, and Ryan Pillay. We have worked hard together with the Gender Transformation Working Group with senior academics and staff like Magnolia Ngobostole, Malanga Mkize, Nadine Delange, Kodanyati, among others. We have lots of students across different faculties who have helped us to pull together the center. Nobubele Puza, Nehemiah Latola, Nikita Nduma, among many other students. I must also mention the Activist Connection Group, the SRC, often represented by Uvyogwa's Guam. In the past year, the academic project of the center was strengthened and felt across the province through the collaborations with Rhodes University via Dr. Magadla and University of Pretoria lecturer Dr. Atambile Masola. Just before the lockdown, the center partnered up with Vocal, led by Eve Thompson, to bring the former president of Malawi, Dr. Joyce Banda. Since March 2020, we have hosted more than 30 speakers during the lockdown across the globe to bring a diversity of topics, including gender and health, women and work and mobility, continuities and discontinuities in youth struggles, women, liberation, populisms, arts, heritage, gender, and finally, a colloquium on African women's intellectual histories. We've ended the Author Fridays last week by inviting one of the most critical gender-conscious comedians, Ms. Celeste Ntuli, who uses comedy to challenge and heal us on issues relating to women, marriage, and class. We have conducted training to more than 40 postgraduate students on reading and writing gender in Africa, writing and queering Africa, thanks to voluntary labor by Professor Nomalanga Mkhize, Gebidla Mini, Kawekazi Makabuka, and Professor Zethu Matebeni, who is a visiting professor at the center. Through our Author Fridays, we have managed to work with over 25 postgraduate students as respondents from Rhodes University and Nelson Mandela. These are the students from different faculties who have never refused to our requests as the center when we're asking for help. Thank you to all the speakers who have graced our online community, Author Fridays in the past 6 months. Siti Makwande Makwetu. As the center, we are looking forward to the book publications, increased research output, and our planned book launches early next year by our very own Professor Phumla Qola, who recently joined the center to advance and advise us on our academic project. As the center, we are intentional in rooting this academic project in the intellectual traditions of the Eastern Cape. We've made a deliberate effort in promoting the university's regional identity as it is linked to the continental and global scholarly cultures. This is where we believe we can use the indigenous languages to expand the vocabularies of gender agenda. As we're taking stock and celebrating a 1 year of existence of this center, I think you all agree that it would have been impossible to launch and run the center without the student colleagues who are here today. Ms. Nom Tamenye, Ms. Sipoka Zitau, Ms. Asiphe Mqalisa, Ms. Thandiswa Mazwai, Ms. Wendy Adams. Thank you for all your efforts. We also welcome our postdoc, Dr. Hlengiwe Ndlovu, who will also be contributing to this rich academic agenda of the center. Let me now welcome our DVC, Professor Andre Kiet, who has been gracious and wonderful in supporting the cause of the center, wherever he's seated in the university. Professor Kiet, over to you. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Babalwa, and thank you to all. Yeah, I feel small, of course, good and grateful, one at the same time. And perhaps those are the right feelings. It's just so amazing to have Thandiswa, Phumla, Babalwa, and all the other great people around. Much thanks for this, and especially the young people and our colleagues from Rhodes University and Pretoria University. We've noticed with great excitement the way in which you have supported a developing network around gender work. And of course, we hope that that will just go from strength to strength in the future. So much thanks for that particular network that's emerging. And it's with great pleasure, of course, that I welcome you to the celebration of the Center for Women and Gender Studies first year anniversary. Now, who can forget the different sets of emotions effective economies, the energy and jubilations at play. Exactly 1 year ago when the center was launched with a specific mandate to advance gender equality and mainstream gender. And as Babalwa said, it has been the result of a number of sets of groups of people working towards the launch of the center. Can forget the sustained work from the activist connections, the students, the staff, the gender forum that was created in 2014. And of course, the amazing initial work being put together by Kenrad under the leadership of Ellen. And of course, these people were not only concerned about, like type of transformation, but more or less focused on the lack of women and gender-related matters not being mainstreamed within the university and spaces outside of the university. We can say without a doubt that the center curated various gender-centered conversations and engagements in our university last year and this year, despite the COVID-19 challenges. And they, under the leadership of Dr. Makwana and with the assistance of smart, astute, terrific young people, and in partnership with those brilliant scholars and students from Rhodes University, our own university, and the University of Pretoria, has given beautiful meaning to the broader transformation project of the university and its intention to be an engaged university in service of society, a sense of where love and justice can work hand in hand. Through the work of the center, they have brought together an intergenerational working group, again referred to by Babalwa, that collaborates across the region and the country. Looking forward to many, many years of great work of the center as the country is still battling with so many gender-related challenges, including GBV and broader gender inequality across so many sectors. But as you know, it's also a regional and global challenge. We hope this working model of bringing different gender scholars and students together will bring us closer to a cohesive gender scholarship that can deal with different forms of inequalities in the sector at large. The center has managed to work with a group of students and staff members across the university to honor the format of its establishment. And of course, you would have heard that in the opening remarks of Babalwa at the launch of the center a year ago. We are hopeful that this will continue, and so that we can see student-led initiatives, which the center in any case is advocating in service of the greater transformational agenda of the university. The case that I'm making all the time, especially from a scholarly and intellectual point of view, but of course with programmatic implications, is that the transformation agenda will be much poorer without a strong gender element to that project. So we are grateful that the center has played that role, and apart from its programmatic interventions, of course, developing its scholarly and intellectual orientation, and of course also grateful that Prof. Pumla has seen it fit to join us within this space. I've also have argued on others in other spaces that the center came across, at least from my point of view, as one of the most active intellectual and scholarly spaces under the COVID-19 conditions of any other space that I've seen within the university. And now I'm not only talking about our own university, but I'm talking about the sector at large. It has created a rhythm of engagement that people are looking forward to. People are looking forward to the Friday discussions, just amazing. And of course, the different sets of scholars that are being mobilized to enrich the space, and of course, that give freely of their time to become co-travelers in this very important journey. Through these collaborations, and of course with stakeholders on the campus as well, the center has put forward and together a gender transformation working group along with the transformation office, and we will work very hard in getting our institutional arrangements and orientation right to work in service of gender equality and gender equity. This working group has been consistent in its meetings, and its potential contribution to the broader university community should not be underestimated, especially in relation to policy making. We are sure that the center will continue this work and train more students to coordinate and lead these initiatives. One of the main things that has been very clear has been the commitment to the academic project of the center that focuses on women's biographical histories. This has certainly positioned the center as an attractive and leading player in excavating women's intellectual histories in this region. And I can attest to that in relation to the people that approaches us to join our university and especially to join the center as well. The presence of one of the most successful music artists, Ms. Thandiswa Mazwai, today is symbolic of the center's reach and ability to articulate its mandate to include different genres of arts in our society. So much thanks to you, Thandiswa. It is really, really appreciated that you are making time to share this event and moment with us. The university's executive and broader community is delighted with the work of the center, and we will definitely continue to support its growth as it embarks on collaborative work with other entities in dealing with the broader transformation of the university and beyond. As we open the medical school, we hope that the center will also spread its interest in dealing with health-related research matters. We are, as a university, the entire university, extremely proud of the center's achievements over the last year. We wish the center many more productive and impactful years in advancing the gender agenda that is inclusive of all women and queer communities. Thank you, and on behalf of the Vice Chancellor and our entire community, I wish the center a happy and buoyant first year anniversary. Much thanks.
Thank you so much, Prof. And thank you so much, Dr. Magogwana. Under your leadership, we've been part of such a great and meaningful work. I am also told that there is a lot of people who have joined us on YouTube, and I would like to take this opportunity to greet them and welcome them in this session. We will now move to the second part of today, which is the interview. And I know a lot of you have been waiting for the interview. The interview will be facilitated by Professor Phumla Qola. Professor Phumla Dinewa Qola is a professor in the Center for Women and Gender Studies. Prof. Qola was part of the center's launch in October 2019. She holds a PhD magna cum laude in post-colonial studies and an MA cum laude in colonial and post-colonial literature. She also has a second MA degree, which she has obtained at the University of Cape Town in 2000. Prof. Qola's work focuses on literature with specific focus on African feminism, African literature, race, class, gender, and histories of slavery. But before we go to Prof. Qola, we will play for the audience a clip of art by Usis Thandiswa. Poncho, please play the song for us.
I'd like to dedicate this song to the great Bushing Chongo. I'd like to dedicate this song. Tavandezi katalelanga ukutubanutini andina msebenzi unjamthanda baby unjenge ngoma yena engishaya ubusuku bonke yokwenza njani ngaphandle kwakho yewe nawe uyingoma yewe uyingoma wena uyingoma yewe uyingoma wena uyingoma wena
We are one. We are 1 year old today. as the Center for Women and Gender Studies at the Nelson Mandela University. And it's a feminist party. We started on a feminist party on this weekend exactly a year ago, and we're doing it again to mark a year of incredible engagements, joy, deliberations, and learning. I'm Pumla Dinaragola. I will be in conversation with a musical genius who needs no introduction, as many people who've joined us on Zoom, on Facebook, on YouTube already know. It's hard to think of post-apartheid music, aesthetics, popular culture, or public culture and not think of this person. Thandiswa Mazwai was born on the 31st of March, 1976. She grew up almost entirely in Soweto amidst the heavy apartheid township violence of the 1980s. Her parents, Belede and Tami Mazwai, were both journalists and anti-apartheid activists. And these are the people that nurtured her in their home filled with books and thick with political discussions. This is how she was nurtured as an artist. And these influences from early on in her life continue to find their way into her current work. Later on, she chose to study at Wits, English and International Relations, like her mother had before her. Her work has been inspired by her late mother, Belede Mazwai, who died when Thandiswa was a teenager at 16. And the writings of other luminaries and revolutionaries like Biko, Fanon, Achebe, and Nkrumah. Thandiswa first attempted a musical career by entering the the talent show Shell Road to Fame, but she dropped out quite early on. Being noticed nonetheless by Don Laga, the famous musician and producer. And so soon after, she started her career with Bongo Muffin, one of the pioneering groups of Kwaito. She became widely recognized as the voice of South Africa's conscious youth. Their compositions, Bongo Muffin's compositions, consistently combined dance floor favorites with thought-provoking lyrics. They were invited to perform all over the world. I remember while I was doing my PhD in Munich on a freezing November evening, watching them play at the Mufatale to standing room only frenzied audiences, only a few of which were South African. And so this appeal and the substantive, the importance of Bongo Muffin, of course, saw them perform as musical greats alongside other musical greats like Stevie Wonder, the Marley Clan, Lady Smith, Black Mambazo, Chaka Khan, Sean Paul, Steve Pulse, and Skunk Anansi, among many, many others. They went on to earn numerous awards, Summers, Horas, All Africa Awards, and Metro Music Awards. In her solo career, Thandiswa Mazwai has garnered even more awards. And as one of the most important artists working anywhere, she has shared stages with other leading musicians like Paul Simon, and Angelique Kidjo, among many others. Thandiswa, thank you so much for agreeing to talk to me. Thank you for joining our feminist party. Thank you for making our feminist party even more lit.
Wow, thank you. Thank you for having me. It almost doesn't seem, it feels like you're not talking about me, you know. I'm one of those people that lives in the moment. And so I don't think so much about what has happened behind me, you know. And when you say it like that, it sounds like a lot, but I still feel like there's so much more that I have to do and learn and experience. Yeah. So thanks for having me.
So let's get to it. Let's get to the conversation that so many have turned out to hear, that I certainly have been looking forward to since you agreed. So in my intro, I talked about your parents, but you've often talked about how actually as a child in Soweto, you had multiple aunts and uncles who kind of co-parented you, that you kind of ran around feeling quite loved and having multiple homes all over Soweto. But of course, your parents still raised you. It strikes me that this sense of multiple belongings is also true of your musical homes, kwaito, jazz, different African musical traditions and streams from various locations. You're an artist living in human history where artists are very often pressured to choose one thing. I mean, we have that ridiculous notion that we hear constantly, that we were raised on, mainly in terms of our kind of education, that if you're multi-talented, you are a jack of all trades or a Jane of all trades and a master of none. So it kind of dissuades you from doing things, right? So, but clearly you don't believe this, thankfully. And you are deliciously uninterested in a single trajectory, it seems to us watching you. Is it easy for you to claim all of your musical homes?
You know, this answer is kind of multifaceted. I think there's a part of me that really loves the idea of being spontaneous, of breaking rules, of not fitting into any particular box. So I live in the space where, you know, growing up, I learned the word deviant. That's what I was called as a young lesbian. Someone said that I was deviant. And I thought, what is this that I'm deviating from, you know? And in fact, I started to relish this idea of being deviant, of being transgressive, of being anarchic. And I think one of the reasons why I don't stick to one particular genre is because I get bored very quickly with things. And I remember not so long ago, I tweeted that whatever I made cool back then, I find extremely boring now. So it's just kind of, you know, I live in that space where I'm constantly changing and reevaluating how far I can stretch myself, you know. But I think on a very personal note, there is something about the idea of home that has been very elusive for me, that I haven't always belonged to any particular group, or I've never had a squad, for instance, you know. And so I've always been one of those people that, and even, you know, through my own life experience, it's been proven time and time again that that home itself is not something that can be owned, that it can be pulled away or taken away. So I always have this kind of, you know, this kind of strange relationship with intimacy. As soon as I build it, I think maybe it's time to let go of it, you know. And it has a lot to do with, you know, the death of my mother and other things. But I think I really just kind of move around because I'm afraid of the intimacy of one place. And some of it is irrational. Some of it is irrational. But I mean, for instance, Kwaito is a home. The stage is a home. I think the stage is really the home that I own, that as a place that I can define as home. And whatever I do on there is like being at home. You can play around, you can mess around, you can be whoever you want to be in this place that can be a proxy for home.
It reminds me, what you're saying reminds me of the Ugandan feminist essayist and poet Jessica Horn. She speaks about home as something that we create and that travels with us. So listening to you talking about the stage as home and Kwaito as home, as this kind of mobile, beautiful, creative home it resonates. But let's talk about Kwaito, because I am also the generation that came of age at the birth of Kwaito. I'm a few years older than you. When Anabangani Bakho started Kwaito, I remember many years ago hearing you say in interviews that Kwaito is a movement and a way of life. That resonated with me as someone who loves Kwaito, who danced to Kwaito, who became a young woman, at the birth of Kwaito, who was becoming an adult, who loved seeing you in a dress and all stars, which is something that's normal now.
Yeah.
But it wasn't really normal then. We were all told like you wore a dress and you wore girly, like proper girl shoes.
You wore the right shoes.
Yes, you wore that. You didn't, and you made it so cool. And I remember that. Bongo Muffin was church, is church. But Kwaito is also complicated. And it's also very masculinist. And the public memory of Kwaito is very jarring, because I often sit as someone who kind of came of age at the same time as a person, and sit and think about how much joy I derived and what it meant and how definitive it is. And I look at the memory and I look at all the boys and its own, and I think, what was going on? And I often wonder about specific Black women who were very visible in Kwaito culture. You musically, someone like Maria Makroyo in Black Rage, and I often wonder what you feel when you see this kind of masculine memory of Kwaito. So Thandiswa, here's the question. That's a very long kind of lead up to the question. The question is, I often wonder, how does a feminist, Thandiswa Mazwai, co-founder of Kwaito, make sense of all of this? What is going on?
I think, okay, there's a few things have jumped out at me while you were speaking. And one of the things that I've had, one of the things that's been contentious for me is this word feminist, right? I came up at a time when the other word was being used, which was womanist. And somehow that word encapsulated my particular experience as a Black woman, Black young woman at the time. And there was something about that particular framing that kind of gave me the impetus to exist in the world without this baggage of gender, right? So when I came into the Kwaito world, I came into it as a young person who had already lost the most valuable, the most important thing in her life. I had already lost my mother. And so when I stepped into these spaces, I didn't think that they were acting in any particular way towards me, but that this was just how life was and that I just had to navigate it. So when I stepped into the world of Kwaito, for instance, as much as Kwaito is a very masculine space, I came into the industry about a year after Boom Shaka blew up. And so for me, it was an extremely feminine, powerful space, because the existence of Lebo Mathosa meant that any woman could exist in this world in any form, in any shape or form that she wanted to encapsulate. And I loved Lebu. I loved Lebu, and Lebu gave me that impetus. Lebu gave me the impetus to be myself, in a way that, in the same way that Brenda Fassie did, or Mama Winnie Mandela did. So when I came into this Kwaito space, it was an empowering, transgressive space, especially for these women who were in the space. In some instances, women were kind of sexualized, but there was a voice. There was suddenly a voice of women that were speaking, whether in these kind of very sexual terms or whatever they were speaking about, but there was a voice. When I'm listening to Atama Fukati, Don't Call Me Kafir, there's a voice there, there's a woman there, and I don't know about the circumstance of how this woman comes into the space, but as someone who's watching, the presence of that woman is enough for me to say, to feel actualized, to feel seen, to feel kind of imagined into these spaces. So Kwaito to me was, I inhabited that space with all my fullness. I wasn't afraid to be in that space. And I felt like the boys were trying to figure it out as much as I was trying to figure it out. And we had a lot of arguments about behaviors, these were young boys, and we were suddenly famous, and there was groupies, and there was a lot of just kind of like wild, behavior on the road. And I had a lot of discussions with them, fighting in the kumbi. A lot of the time, just me, I'd be the only woman that wasn't brought into the kumbi, like I wasn't somebody's girl or something. And I would have these conversations with these guys, confronting them in front of these women, and then also talking to these women the next day, like, yo, I know you're doing this because you want to do it, but I think we do need to consider 1, 2, and 3. And then, let's just make sure that even though you're here, you're empowered, because I know these boys. So it was a space of great growth. What's that line from Dickens? It was a time of, I don't know what it was. It's an opening line of one of Dickens's novels, where he says it was a time of great, just kind of discovery. It was a time of great discovery. And also, Kwaito created so much. So much comes out of Kwaito. Things like Stone Cherry comes out of Kwaito, Kwaito suddenly creates independent record labels, So, and I think that the women in Kwaito, for me, were the reason why I wanted to make music, why I wanted to say something, because they had opened up that space that cracked the little chasm in the wall that allowed me to peer through and see something of myself.
That is wonderful. I could listen to you forever, because of course, that also explains exactly what you're saying, explains why Kwaito was so joyful for so many women, and maybe exactly why it jars that it's being remembered. Of course, when I say remembered, I don't mean in the people's heads, but I'm seeing a lot of Kwaito documentaries, and I'm thinking,
yeah,
wait a minute, why was this so joyful for so many of us who were women?
Yeah.
And so listening is just so precious, because I'm like, that's what it was. That was so wonderful. That's what we were feeling and intuiting too. So maybe a little bit, Bonzo, can we play something from Thandiswa? Okay, so thank you. I was dancing a bit. I forgot myself. I forgot where I was for a minute. So Bongo Muffin, Thandiswa, where are you? Was such a phenomenon. It was 4, then 3 people who worked incredibly as a group. Yet you were so different, so distinct. It seemed even from the outside. What do you attribute the spectacular success of Bongo Muffin to? Not just as mind-blowing, consistent hit maker who brought so much joy. I mean, we fell in love and made friendships and broke up, and we lived our whole lives to Bongo Muffin. So it was the hits. It was this like really incredibly energizing Pan-African aesthetic and just unapologetic, I don't know, magic. And yet you seemed like it was magical, but it was so mysterious as well, because you looked at 4 people who looked like they potentially could live in totally different worlds, and yet they worked so well together. And gave us such kind of life-changing music.
We did live in different worlds.
Did you?
Of course. I mean, you know, this is Speedy and Stone and Justin and Thandiswa, you know. And I think I want to attribute this to the genius, or maybe it's just kind of like that, like ability that Oskido has to find people that are talented, or they just appear in his world. And he's like, okay, you, and you, let's go, you know? And I think it's also because we were so different from one another, we could problematize everything in these spaces together, you know? So when Speedy comes through with the chains, I'm like, well, I'm coming through with my African beats. Justin is like, I'm putting on a rap for the Rastas, you know? So there was something about that space that forced not only us, but I think everyone else to be so much more accepting of the differences that we have, and to realize that there's actually melody there, that when we all sing in our own tune, you can develop a chorus, you can develop, you know, yeah, that's it, you can develop a chorus. And we were young, we all loved each other. And I think it was also that Kwaito in itself was kind of this infiltration of spaces, of just kind of everything was being infiltrated. So we were part of that euphoria. And I think we, all of us in this Kwaito generation, were able to encapsulate that euphoria, what everyone was feeling anyway. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like the art imitating life, or life imitating art. What you were feeling, we were writing. What we were writing, you were feeling. And I think that's why Bongo Muffin worked. It also works because it's Pan-African, because you get to hear Shona, and you hear Xhosa, and you hear Tswana, and you hear Zulu, because everyone can see themselves in it. It somehow represented it represented an entire world of possibility, where we could travel to, what languages we could learn, what experiences we could have, you know. As a South African for whom travel was an illegal experience, to hear these other languages in our songs, to hear it in the radio, really for me meant that I was actually free. I was free enough to sing in Shona and to go to wherever, you know. I had the freedom to roam and the freedom to speak in my words, in my language. And I think that's what the magic was for me.
Okay, but now I know that.
Excuse me, cheers.
Enjoy. First of all, I know that artists of all kinds, music, visual, writers, are not always the easiest people on the one hand. On the other hand, I also know that even if people love each other, that very often work that looks very easy and beautiful and seamless is actually a lot of hard work. So, I mean, I'm hearing what you're saying about what made the joy beautiful, what made the magic possible. But I also know that magic isn't easy to make. That in fact, those things that look easiest and most beautiful are usually the result of very hard work. And I mean, I suppose I don't know what I mean by hard work. I mean they're not laziness. They don't just kind of spring fully formed from the ground, or like jump out of our head. What was the hard work in Bongo Muffin? Was there, or was it just you were also magical and in sync and brilliant that it wasn't hard work?
There was a part of it that is that we were in sync, we were young, and there was a magic, there was a destiny that was calling to us despite ourselves, you know. And so when we did get into the studio, we really just kind of worked together. And all the kind of earlier work, I would say, was very easy. Because we were wide-eyed teenagers, you know, expressing ourselves for the first time, finding words, finding melody for the first time. And so I think that even, I mean, I would imagine the hardest thing would have been the arguments that we had about how women act, how men act, what, you know, what gig we can do, what gig we shouldn't do, you know. So for instance, we'll get a call from, you know, some political party, and then somebody will say, oh, should we take this gig? And I'll say, I don't perform for politicians because, you know, I'm with the people and I'm not going to be on that stage, you know, working for the politicians to dupe the people. But, and then somebody would say, well, but it's just the money, let's just go get the money. So I think those were just those kind of formative years where we're finding out who we really are as young people. The hard stuff started coming a lot later when we became adults. And now our lives had really merged into each other's lives. We had children with each other, you know, others had their own children, and our families, we knew so much about each other that after a while it just became heavy, just kind of emotionally it wasn't easy to create music because we had done too much with one another and we had upset each other one too many times. But the work itself, I think, has always been beautiful, and Bongo Muffin has always been a very joyful, joyous space for me. And it's been a space that has been affirming, and is how I chiseled my skill, is how I chiseled my ideas, you know. So it wasn't difficult is the answer to your question. It was beautiful. It was beautiful.
Great. Okay, enough Bongo Muffin. Now let's talk about Thandiswa post. Okay, I shouldn't say post Bongo Muffin because you're all saying you haven't really split up.
Yeah.
In your debut album, Zabalaza, which just, I mean, I think everybody was expecting mind-blowing, but I think, you know, you created so many anthems for us, different kinds of anthems. You made us think about where we were coming from. We could just spend an hour, I suppose, just talking about Zabalaza. And there's a lot there. But I want to talk about Winnie. You love her with all the difficulties that come with loving her. And as a spirit was getting ready to leave, we were at King Tha Day, at your birthday celebration on the 31st of March. And it was a wonderful moment. And of course you performed many times, including for her. But it struck me at the time, and it makes even more sense subsequent to this, that there was something almost otherworldly about your performance that night. It seemed to me that as you sang Matikizela over and over and over and over again that night specifically, in addition to the goosebumps that always come with your renditions of Nizala Ngobane, there was something additionally beautiful that day. Like you had, I've thought about how to ask this question so many times, and I'm still battling to answer it. And so maybe while you think about the question that I haven't asked.
Yeah, I just to go back to that day, it was 31st of March, and it was 2 days before Mama Winnie passed away. And it was strange because I had just suddenly decided that I was going to do a celebration that was women only, that there would only be women in this event. And, that everyone who was on stage would be women, everyone who was in the audience would be women, anyone who was working in the venue would be women. And of course you were there. And it was such a magical experience. I remember sending out a poster that said, I just forgot the words now. Anyway, I'll come back to that. But I agree with you that on that day, the performance of that song was very different, very, very different. I usually, when I'm singing that song, when we get to the part where we call out the names, I start with Matikizela. Then I say Biko, I say Sobukwe, I mention all these people, I say Mamungoi, depending on where I am and how I'm feeling. But on that, and usually it's kind of like Matikizela, Matikizela, like really sweet. But on that day, it just took over me in like my chest literally felt like it was exploding. And I remember how I growled her name that night and kept repeating it and kept repeating it. And that's usually the first song in the show. It was the first song in the show. And I'm very energetic on stage. I do not get tired on stage. I don't care what's going on. I can play 2 hours running around. I don't get tired on stage. On that day, as soon as we finished that song, I sat down for the first time in my life. I don't sit down on stage. But it was so overpowering and so just, there was an energy in the air. There was an energy. And it had been carried through the entire day. How you spoke, how Bev spoke, how Millie spoke, how, there was this incredible dancer who danced and took off all her clothes in front of the audience, took off all her clothes. And, at the end of her performance, I went backstage because after everybody spoke, I would go and, thank them. And I went backstage and her and I wept for about 20 minutes after that because of how powerful this day was and what was actually going on in the room. Women were literally screaming and taking off their clothes. Some of them in complete celebration and others in complete, utter disbelief that they could be in a public space and nothing like that could happen, or that they thought nothing like that could happen because safe spaces are a fantasy. They're always dangerous. So there was just something about that day. And, Umamuwini for me has always represented that woman, the one who bows to no one, who does not follow your rules but makes her own, who thrives and fights, who is a celebration, who is dangerous, who is you know, just naughty, beautiful, sexy, everything all in one, you know. And so I was never, ever, ever going to let go of my lauding of Mamuwini Mandela, because as I lauded Mamuwini Mandela, I lauded every kind of woman that I was. You know, Mamuwini Mandela allowed me to say, I am what you say I am. I'm a bitch, I'm a diva, I'm a whore, I'm a queen, I'm a king, I'm all that you say I am. Yes, I am everything that you say I am, and I should be, because it is my life, you know. And so it makes me want to cry, because she really dares us all to just kind of live, you know, despite it all, in spite of it all, live, you know, bravely.
Absolutely. And I mean, I think that just being in that show, of course, everybody knows, well, I don't know if everybody, I'm sure everybody knows that women throw their bras at King Tah, at you, at your feet, at King Tah concerts. So I think all of us expected to see a few bras, but like you say, it was something else, that you had really created something that I don't think any of the women in that room had ever experienced. That is the absolute ability to imagine what it would feel like if we really were free to do whatever the hell we wanted. We knew we could be anything in that space and not be violated, and not be blamed for violating, not be looked at funny, and not have some weird person taking pictures and posting them online, or poking at you, or pretending to poke at, you know, just like all the nonsense. So thank you so much.
And not to say that women themselves don't have some other behaviors to unlearn, but there was something about that space that, you know, I think it was the newness of it that made us feel like, you know, anything was possible, you know. After that, Bev came to me and she said, "Tah, you're dangerous. You're dangerous." And I said, "Thank you, finally."
As if she didn't know that before. I think this is a good moment to play another short clip, Bonzo.
Oh, my dick is there. 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 We'll never forget you. Oh, we'll never forget what you've done. Oh, we'll never forget. Oh, we'll never forget what you've done.
Okay, so that wasn't the performance, but you know, that was a fantastic performance too. I want to talk about language. So, Thandiswa, you're red, you're King Tah, your guns ablaze. You have an all-woman band sometimes, and you have the fabulous King Tah Day that we've just talked about. I've always wondered, because sometimes when we are fans, or when people are very public and they work and their presence is important to us, we as your super fans, well, me as your super fan and your other fans, start to imagine that we know you and we are much closer to you than we really are. I suppose it's the burden of celebrity, right? Are you, and you give us so much in your music, and you consistently have given us so much in your music. We've just talked about one particular event. I've always wondered, are you as free and self-loving and joyful in your real life as you give us permission to be. It was interesting when you're talking about Winnie and what she gives you, and I was thinking, that's fascinating, because so much of what your work and your public persona generates is so much of the same, that permission to have us in our weirdness, especially as kind of weird, slightly quirky, too much women, feel more comfortable, more seen, more okay in our own skin. Are you as joyful as you make us? Are you as free as you in real life? You don't have to answer this. I mean, it might be probing.
You know, I think that this is the toughest question you've asked. Am I as joyful in real life? No, I'm not as joyful or as brave or as whatever it is. I am afraid. I live with a lot of fear, and I'm uncomfortable in my skin, and I am uncertain. But what I've done is I've tried to remind myself that that fear lives with me only to propel me to be brave. That it's only because I live with so much fear that I'm able to be brave, because I'm well versed in the things that I'm afraid of. I'm well versed in trembling. I'm well versed, you know, so every time I step on a stage, I shake, but I do it anyway. And that's what I try to do with my whole life, is that even as I'm trembling, I should give myself the chance to experience things. So, you know, art is about experience, and that's and it's about truth. And so what I do is I try and give my most authentic voice to you. And sometimes you can't tell the fear. Sometimes you can't tell that I'm crying through a particular song. There's songs that I cry when I'm performing them. And sometimes, and maybe the audience doesn't notice me crying, but they notice how they feel. And I allow myself to be that for all of us, for myself and for you, I allow this artist self to give us all, including myself, the healing that we need, the impetus that we need to continue to live, the space to re-examine ourselves, to excavate our memories and reinterpret them, and rewrite them. That's what my artist self does for me. And I've come to learn that it does the same thing for you. And so I allow the trembling. I allow for my body to be uncomfortable so that the artist can do what is important in the world.
Ooh, wow. Okay. I could talk to you forever, but I also know that you have a concert after this, and I see there's like hundreds of questions. I'm going to ask one more. I'm going to ask one more, and then you not monopolize it completely. So Thandiswa, we know what I wanted to talk about. You know, I wanted to talk about two more songs, but I think maybe I'll just mention them, and then I'll ask you a different question. So I was thinking about the Wegunga Kono. You know, I mean, Jesus, the lyrics to that song. Sometimes I think, like, who has not felt, okay, child or no child, in the Wegunga Kono. I'm not gonna even try to, I mean, I sing it normally when I say it, but I'm not gonna sing it in front of you. I mean,
Please do it.
It's gonna be too embarrassing. Oh, I think of one of my favorite, one of your songs that I'm so obsessed with that I even kind of titled one of my essays after Indaba Kabantu Bandula Shumlenze. You know, so just like, oh, when we ngoma, it's just that the range and the freedom and the sexiness and the fire and so on. And we know, of course, that often when you talk about the women, Belete, your mommy, Musi, I'm being very like cheeky and calling all them by their first name, like Malingalanam, Musi,
Our friends.
Winnie, Madosini. Netta, we know what they mean to you, right? And what they give you, what you say they give you. We know what you give us, who share the planet with you, and maybe something of what you'll leave behind when you are a very, very, very old woman and you shuffle off to the next realm. But the world often responds in hard, vile, violent, and sometimes stupid ways to genius and unapologetic women like yourself. So I'm interested, what have women who are younger than you taught you? So what have your younger sisters taught you? What has Nsiki taught you? What has your baby, Malaika, who probably will be very cross, but I suppose she's old enough now not to mind being called a baby anymore.
Yeah.
What are the younger people? What have they taught you? Nomsa. Sorry, I didn't mean to leave Nomsa out.
Yes, I have other siblings, you know. I think that, you know, not to sound too old, because I'm only 44, but there's a way in which growing older can make you a little jaded. And what I have found in my sisters and, you know, biological and otherwise, so Ziki, Nomsa, my sisters in the sisterhood, the younger ones, is that they have reinvigorated me, and have inspired a lot of the new works. For instance, the song Jigijela on the Melete album is completely dedicated to the Black feminist movement during the Fees Must Fall movement, because there was just the way that the voice became reinvigorated. But on a personal note, because I think on a personal note, what my sisters and my daughter have taught me is the extent to which I can love, and also the extent to which I can be loved. As someone who lives with a lot of loss in my world, my sisters and my daughter represent that sense of family that, you know, that is so precarious. You know, they represent something that is firm, that is settled, that is warm. You know, they represent home to me. You know, I love how brazen and strong Ntsiki is. My daughter is exactly the same way. She is a carbon copy of her auntie Ntsiki, is a carbon copy of her auntie Nomsa, you know, is a carbon copy of her grandmother, because Ntsiki is her mother. And, you know, whenever Ntsiki goes wild, our aunts phone us and they go, "Hi, kubele tekelo, kubele wayenenkani bele, wayengamamelu bele," you know. So Ntsiki reminds me of my mother. They remind me of my mother. They are the reincarnation of that idea of mother, of home, of that idea of being cradled, ukusingatha or ukufumbathwa ngengubo yothando. That is what they represent to me, you know. It's not anything, you know, you might want me to say something else, but for me, what these people represent is that they represent home, they represent love, they represent acceptance and regeneration. Yeah.
Oh, wow. And so we've come full circle. We started on home and we end on home. Thandiswa Mazwai, it has been a gift and a joy and a pleasure. I told you when we were preparing that I was going to have fun anyway. I didn't know what I was talking about. It has been a million times better. Thank you for your work. Thank you for taking the time to talk to me and to join our feminist party and to be part of our feminist party at the Center for Women and Gender Studies. I can't wait for your concert later on. Thank you so much. I'm going to hand over back to Asipe now, who is going to handle the other questions, I think, from the other people.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Pumla. I really enjoyed it. Thank you. Oh, the concert is on Joburg, artsalive.joburg.
Yeah.
That's what the concert is, to everyone who's asking. I saw someone asking that question.
Yeah. Good evening, everyone. It's Porazi, by the way. Sis Thandiswa, I'm just going to run through a couple of comments that are coming in and just questions that are coming in. Of course, we are very mindful of time, but I think everyone just is such in awe of you and just wants to get the opportunity to engage. So I'm going to put as much as we can. Here's a comment from Muntombo Vuyo saying, I grew up listening and learning from Sis Thandiswa. Her Black conscious aesthetic made it easy for me to love myself as a young Black woman. And I think also Dr. Masola saying she used some of your music as part of her PhD thesis as well. Let me see. Loiso saying, I love and appreciate these spaces of telling her story. Thank you so much. Let's just see. Okay. So I'm just going to move to YouTube quickly, because there's some comments coming in from YouTube before we get into questions. Lesego saying, Thandiswa is so incredibly articulate. Always loved how she articulates her thinking. And just Sasa saying, I love your music, Thandiswa. It has carried me through many stages of my life. There's also a comment here from Lawrence Luanga saying, if God doesn't have the kind of energy King Ta has, magayeke. So, I mean, I think go ahead. Did you want to say something?
No, I just wanted to say how incredible it is, because one of the great things about being in the industry that I am is that you are told almost on a daily basis, people tell you on a daily basis that they love you, you know, and that's something that people don't get to hear. Some people live their whole lives not hearing these words, and it's just, it always brings me to tears to think about how often I get to hear these words and how validating they are, and how it makes it that much more important for me to really insert myself into the work with wholeheartedly and authentically, so that I can give back some of that feeling,
Yeah, but I suppose that speaks to, of course, how spiritual your music becomes, and how what you find as your fans, or also a super fan, us affirming you is also us feeling quite affirmed through your art and your music. There's a question coming here saying, please ask King Ta how spirituality influences her music. Her music heals. Does she consider herself a healer?
I didn't always consider myself a healer, but I think that now I do, just because I've also become that much more intentional about the healing purpose of my work. I go into it hoping that I can shift something in the room, or shift something in the world, that I can change something in the world. So yeah, it is a spiritual encounter for me. And I use it as a way of creating fellowship between myself and the audience or anyone who's listening. Yeah.
All right. There's another question, and I think it draws on to the later, to your reflections earlier on when you were talking about this idea of dress. And so it's been pulled into the current discourse. There's also quite some commentary on Twitter from Gobani Kambela as well, just commenting on how they found that your response was quite positive in terms of how you engaged women's sexualities or thought of it when you were entering Kwaito. So the question here is, what are Thandiswa's views on the changing roles of women in Kwaito and hip hop? From being almost primarily sexualized props to being lead artists, redefining the role of women in the art world. So to now owning and using their sexuality in music, and this person is making a reference to the WAP era, if you like.
It is I think that there's always been a movement in every generation that is trying to break some kind of, you know what Lebu called these chains that are binding me,
right?
You know, to be free from these chains that are binding me. Women, village women, when they write their songs, write songs to free themselves from the chains that are binding me. A song like Lahlumlenze actually was a take from a village song that spoke of women saying, you know? And so sorry, I've kind of lost my train of thought now because I threw so many things at you. What was the question again?
So the question, and I think while you're getting to it, just the last part is what are your thoughts on the changing roles of women in hip hop? Yes.
On the changing roles, yeah. So I think that these roles are constantly changing, constantly. We're always changing how we move around in the world. You know, there was a time, let's say, because I was a big hip hop head, and there was a time when I was listening to hip hop as a kid, and it was Lil Kim, and she was like, my pussy, my this, my ass, my that, my I can do, you know. And then it went to let's say Queen Latifah, who was like, who you calling a bitch, you know, and she was like, I'm a queen. So we're always negotiating spaces. Right. We're always you know, trying to find a way in which we can exist in our fullness, that we can be a queen and a slut. Like, yes, thank you very much. I'm doing the whole thing. So I think that what is happening now is what is always happening. You know, that we go from place to place. We go from you know, wanting to really own our sexuality to saying, well, stop with the sexuality. Can we talk about what I am, what I really am? And, you know, so I think I don't have a problem with any kind of music that women make, because when women make music, they make the music that liberates them in their own personal space.
Right. I'm looking at the time, so I'm just going to feed you with very affirming comments, which you deserve. Zandile saying, thank you, King Ta. Always riveting to listen to you, whether you are singing or sharing your perspective. Dr. Darlene Miller saying, what a beautiful spirit. And I think like these sentiments, I mean, we all just share these same sentiments of how you've come into what is traditionally known as an intellectual space for you to share your intellect. And I think you stand as an authority figure within this space as well. So thank you so much. I'm looking at the time, and I think I'm going to bring in my colleague, Thandiswa Jubase. But before I do that, I want to give you a minute or two for any closing comments that you'd like to part us with.
Well, I think I would just like to say that this entire experience is really beautiful and affirming, and I'm really thankful that you created the space to be able to affirm us all. and also to say again that you are an inspiration to me, and I hope that, you know, we can all grow together in love, in the sisterhood, and even more than that, we can all grow together as a human family, because we need our brothers, we need our sisters, we need all the diversities that exist on this planet. So I'm grateful that we can create these spaces, and thank you. I mean, the one thing that I've realized during this lockdown is that we need each other. I cannot live without you people. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Sis Thandiswa. And as Deboho says there, thank you for validating the healer in you. With those words, I want to call my colleague to the platform, Yandisa Jubase, just to officially close the session for us. Yandisa?
Greetings, everybody, and thank you so much, Spogazi. Molweni, Botani, and indeed, I think I speak on behalf of everyone here today that our hearts are full. My job here is simple as Spogazi has said. My name is Uyandisa Jubase, and I work as a research assistant at the Center for Women and Gender Studies. Namhlanje, I have come with the very small but so significant job to come and show gratitude on behalf of the Center for Women and Gender Studies to Thandiswa Mazwai for not only availing herself today, but really being such an important figure in just reshaping the idea of what an African woman is in our contemporary time. Siyabulela sisi, and ngesixhosa bathi nangamso. Also, on that note, colleagues, I'd also like to thank Prof. Gola, who did such a fantastic job in just being able to bring out the different narratives and just the different facets of this powerhouse of Thandiswa Mazwai here today. Colleagues, as you would be aware, I'd also just like to also thank the organizing team from the Center for Women and Gender Studies, who not only organized today, but who have been there pushing for the past year since the center has launched. I'd like to just read on the note of celebrating this team, just a few of the messages that they have written in celebrating today and the Center for Women and Gender Studies. I'd first like to begin by my message, which says, I think it's quite fitting that I begin by applauding the Center for Women and Gender Studies for the body of work that it has produced in such a short space of time. The intellectual project of the center has made a significant contribution in the Mandela community and various other institutions and entities in thinking through and centering the gender conversation in our society. It has been an honor and a huge learning experience to have formed a part of the conception and the growth of the Center for Women and Gender Studies. Under the leadership of Dr. Babalwa Makokwana, the center has grown in leaps and bounds. Moving forward, I'd like to wish the center more growth as it continues to engage in such important work of archiving Black women's intellectual contributions in society, not only for this generation, but for the generations that come after us. Makwande Kukanye. Unomta, who's also a research assistant at the center, says, it almost feels unreal that the center is already a year old. It feels like only yesterday when I was overwhelmed with emotions speaking at the launch of the center last year. The center has achieved so much in a space of a year. However, the work is not done. So much more still needs to be done. The aspirations we had last year of making the center a space of inhlambuluko, healing, has transpired in ways we could have never imagined. The weekly Author Fridays, the student colloquium in June, and Inyati Ibuzwa Kwabaphambili colloquium in August were successfully executed during a world pandemic.
And there are some of the projects that further emphasize the importance of the center. The work would have, however, not been possible without the interim director, Dr. Makokwana, who has created a hub of thinkers in the center. I also equally share gratitude for the staff of the Center for Women and Gender Studies, the Vice Chancellor's Office, Transformation and Engagement Office, CANRAD, Krishet, the people who joined our weekly reading sessions. Many more of your continuous support will be appreciated. I wish the center many successes. Uasipe then says, the Center for Women and Gender Studies has been my safe space as a student, staff, mother, and an activist. It allowed me the space to be all while contributing to the broader mandate of an inclusive gender agenda. I wish the center well for the future, and it may continue to producing vibrant programming, research, scholarship on gender. Uspokazi Dau then says, I'd like to congratulate the Center for Women and Gender Studies in this historical milestone. The work of the center has been a home for many emerging gender and women scholars, of which I have faith that it will continue to challenge the status quo. I'm excited to see how the space will continue to grow, to host multiple intellectual histories and conversations. And then Wendy, who's the administrator of the center, says, I have the privilege to be a part of a group of ladies who represent the Center for Women and Gender Studies. I'm so proud of the center and what it has achieved in 1 year. I'm proud of all the beautiful ladies who put their heart and soul into the work to make the center what it is today. And it's only the beginning. Here's to many more years. Congratulations, Center for Women and Gender Studies, on your 1 year anniversary. Colleagues, just to wrap it up, it's indeed been a great day. Just a few announcements before we end today's session. Firstly, as you have heard, Mrs. Thandiswa is going to be having a concert live just now at 8 o'clock, and you can catch that live stream on artslive.joburg, .joburg. So please just check it out, and it is on her Instagram as well, and join in on that concert. And the second announcement is that the center will be continuing celebrating its anniversary throughout October, and we'll be reading the various messages from different stakeholders and the people who have supported us on this journey. But for now, please do diarize and note that on the 16th of October, 2020, the center will be collaborating with Krishet under the theme COVID-19 and Humanities in South Africa. Please do look out for the poster and the details to follow. Ngalo mazwi ndithi ndiyabulela and Tsamako.